This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend. I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain, almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, grasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I encountered something inhuman in those woods. Edit. I know I will receive questions such as what the voice was possibly saying, or to explain the area and what happened after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly can't recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All that I recall is that it was a fluctuating voice in pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting. I'm a paranormal enthusiast who has spent a lot of time on the AT, including a through hike, and I think the reputation is getting overblown by TikTok. I have had experiences there and in other places, but nearly all were very benign. One was scary AF, but I have no explanation for it. I'll cover it towards the end. The Appalachians are very old, and it's hard to describe, but they often feel very old. It's a different feeling from the Rocky Mountains, and the very few remaining stands of old-growth forest in places that were too hard to log have a very serene, tranquil feeling. It's wonderful. One thing a lot of people miss is that you cover a lot of Civil War history on that hike, and some legendary battles between tribes of Native Americans around the Blood Mountain area. Up towards Harper's Ferry, you're even walking through old Civil War trenches, and it's there that a number of hikers, myself included, see or think they see ghosts. I'm pretty certain I did in a Civil War era clothing. There were a few other incidents, but nothing scary until Pennsylvania, unless you count the very real bear I smacked in a half-asleep state in my hammock. He or she booped me through the hammock. In my 3/4 asleep state, I smacked the snout. Bear ran off. I sat awake for the rest of the night thinking, OMFG, I smacked a bear. In PA, I was camped solo, cowboy camping, no shelter. Weather was nice, no reason to unpack it. And something woke me up and I was absolutely terrified. Didn't see anything, hear anything, but kind of a weird, extremely faint, high-pitched whine, and I couldn't put a direction to it. No animal noises either. There was a very oppressive feeling, heavy air. I decided to GTFO by headlamp, found a blaze and scooted up trail. Feeling went away after about half a mile. It's happened to me one other time, and that was locally. So I think there are some genuine places where paranormal activity happens along the trail, but even within the dedicated hiking community, people who are out there a lot, nothing like the stories I've heard, feral people, dogmen, that kind of stuff. I do think I can explain one story that may or may not be circulation. Get ready to laugh. Us, a group of very hungry, you're always hungry, at through hikers at the Mt. Rogers IIRC shelter, which has a phone and a nearby pizza place that will deliver to the shelter, or at least it used to. Most of us had gotten soaked in the rain earlier and were drying out. It was dark with decent thunderstorm going on, perfect for spooky stuff, and we'd pulled some money for pizza and beer. They would deliver beer too, very unofficially and illegally, and called in a pretty big order. And we waited. Then we saw headlights pull into the parking lot. We pulled on some rain gear. Most of us had stripped down to the minimum. Wet, cold hikers are not the most modest group in the world, even in mixed company. Exited the shelter and started heading out to the car, stiff legs from hauling a pack all day and being cold and wet. Probably some groaning and grumbling going on. The driver of that minivan flipped his or her shit. High beams came on and his tires were spinning in reverse. Then he just kind of sat for a second as he shifted in to drive and his wheels just spun on the pavement before he fishtailed out of the parking lot, engine whining its loudest. We're all kind of like WTF. Then the real pizza guy showed up. The one used to seeing hikers in rain gear walking out of a shelter like a bunch of groaning zombies in the middle of the night. He even said zombies as a comment on us. So my dog ran off, chasing a female in heat. He ran about 2 miles plus down the mountain from where I live and into another residential community. I basically kept following clues and talking to people until I found his trail. I remember meeting a family along the main road who said they saw the dog run up the small road that turns to dirt and goes into the woods. This is not uncommon. These roads, in fact, were made by General Braddock on his way to his eventual demise. It's common to find old musket balls, coat buttons, etc. on these roads. I found an old time-loaded Derringer pistol corroded and practically fossilized in a stream by my house as a kid. Area is really old in human terms too. Anyway, the daughter offered to give me a ride on her four-wheeler up to the woods. Her dad was okay with it, but neither wanted to go into the woods and I didn't hold it against them. I was 16 BTW, I'm 36 now. I hop on the back rack of the ATV and she hauls me up the hill and out of the valley into the edge of the woods. I thank her and begin my hike. I loved that dog. On my way in, I start seeing old cars and trucks sitting on the sides of the road here and there. They were those old ones from the 40s. Saw a car that looked like an old Model T as well. I remember thinking how out of nowhere it felt. Like I walk around the bend, not 10 minutes in, and I see these really old vehicles. They obviously don't run and have seen time and nature. So I keep going, see some old shacks along the way. Then the road switches back and starts going down the side of the wooded mountains. As I make it to the path below, I notice two things. The sound of bees swarming and a barbed wire fence. I start really looking, and I notice the fence surrounds a camp with old trailers and campers. There are chickens roaming around and clothes drying on the line, and there's campfire cooking something. I'm just shocked and taking in the view and realize this community, or whatever it is about the size of a football field, probably bigger. The road I'm on follows the length of it, and I see dog tracks on it, about the right size and shape. So I take a breath, keep myself aware, and walk between the fence and the unsettling thing to the right, and bees swarming to my left. It felt like an eternity walking along that place. I tried to be quiet and never really saw people in there. Just obvious signs of people living there. At some point I lose the trail and decided I've walked a long time and I needed to turn back. As I headed back, I decided I needed to be really wary of anyone being around. I'm kind of creeping and sneaking my way back, and I see a dude with a hunting rifle a flannel coat and a trucker hat just stalking around. I assumed he saw me go by the first time. Part of me wanted to think he was game hunting for food, entirely possible, but I had to assume the worst given the fact I'm all alone in a really unexpectedly weird place. I'm a tall dude, so I feel a bit secure, but all I have is a knife. I remember crouching in the bushes and watching that guy for a long time, trying to wait for a window to get back to the part of the road that leads away from this place. You 100% unequivocally do not want to take a shortcut in these woods. You will only get lost. You can get lost going 20 feet in and getting turned around, and no one will be able to find you. The dude eventually goes back past me and out of my way, and I sneak my way to the road. Once I'm on the road going back up to the old vehicles, I full sprint out of there. I make it back to town, and people were about to send the police to look for me. Apparently, I was out there for 6 hours. Dog was found by a friend, he was okay. I love how much you all care about man's best friend. Validates everything I did, Ty. Oh wow, I feel this in my bones. My uncle, Mom's brother, has had a farm in southeast WV since the 70s, long before I came into this world. Mom is the oldest of 5, and my uncle built a bunch of houses on the farm, so family could use it whenever. Some lived there and other, like my family, visited often. My mom and older sister and I would go for weeks on end to spend time with family, and I always loved it because I have a ton of cousins and was the baby for a long time. So mostly I tagged along with my cousins and felt extremely safe, like it was my happy place. I don't really remember anything totally out of the ordinary when I was really little, other than I remember an imaginary friend whom I exclusively played with at the farm, nowhere else, and we moved extensively for Dad's job, so I've lived in many different places. What I remember after age 5 was suddenly being old enough to not have to have someone walk me to and from other houses, which I thought was so cool, so I used to explore. My uncles liked to bow hunt and had taken me a few times not too far into the woods, so I was able to go back on my own and find their little tree platforms they had built to hunt from. I thought they were cool little tree houses. Your story sounds a lot like the very last time I ever took off by myself in the woods without another family member with me. It was the winter. I wanted to be out in the snow and explore. So I found my way up the mountain, that is what I called it, but in fact it was probably just a massive hill, and into the trees. I couldn't find the spot I was looking for and got pretty frustrated with my 8-year-old self. So I sat down by a creek to catch my breath and figure out where I was. I couldn't have been sitting more than about 3 minutes when something let out a scream I can only describe as blood-curdling. I thought it was a fox, most likely, until I heard another voice crying, just weeping and wailing, and the sorrow was palpable. My cousins had always told scary stories about Appalachia, and I figured that they had followed me into the woods and were trying to scare the pants off me for shots and giggles. I called out like, "Okay guys, not funny. Okay, I'm going home, enough," and followed my footprints in the snow as fast as I could back to the farm. The screaming and crying didn't stop, stayed consistent as I moved, which really made me convinced it had to be my cousins. I don't think I heard words, just crying and screaming, but it wasn't pleasant. Made my way back to the main house, my uncle's house, which was the biggest on the property and visible from the edge of the woods, and absolutely booked it, ran full tilt to get to the kitchen door. I remember getting through the door and slamming it behind me, because I was a combo of terrified and annoyed that my cousins were playing a prank on me. The next closest cousin in age is 9 years older than me, and so I was often the butt of pranks. Well, wouldn't you know, every family member was accounted for in the living room, child's kitchen. The older male cousins and my uncles were in the kitchen putting their snow boots and coats on to come look for me. I had apparently been gone for several hours, and they were worried. According to my mum, I was white-faced, my hands were covered in scratches through my mittens. I guess I must have fallen or something. They were so worried I had disappeared. I should add, I set off from my aunt's to walk to my uncle's, and had decided to take a detour and didn't tell anyone. Oops. I was 8 and really didn't think about how that might be bad. Mum said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I asked if anyone had come out to the woods to look for me. They said, "No, we've been looking at the different houses, and we're just about to come look for you," because they saw my footprints head into the woods. I told them about where I went and what I heard, and my uncle, whose property it was, said, "Oh shit, I think you probably ran into the witch." I'm over here thinking, oh, some crazy lady lives in the woods, and I probably stumbled near her cottage. Nope. The witch was just what they called the unknown entity that roamed the woods, screaming, crying, mimicking people's voices and just giving people a good old sense of doom and dread. No one had a straight answer about possible folklore or anything like that, but all my older cousins had their own experiences with similar happenings over the years. Scared the living daylights out of me, and while I've been back to the farm over the years, I can tell you, I have never once set foot near the woods tree line, even as an adult. I was grateful my family didn't think I was crazy, but they said a general rule is not to be in the woods alone. So I listened. To my knowledge, nothing physical ever happened with anyone, and this entity, more of a prankster than anything. But oof, the Appalachia has some wild stuff. I definitely remember some strange stuff happening during the week we had my aunt's funeral when I was 21, and random voices or red eyes or smoke apparitions on the wood's edge, but I never went to check them out after that one incident. Edit. I should add that 100% of the family that was at the farm that trip was accounted for at my uncle's house getting ready to come look for me. So if it was anything other than something supernatural, it was not from anyone staying at the farm.